So quick introduction, my name is Jenny Chu. I'm an associate professor at the university here at Cambridge, and I work with Alan at the Center for Financial Reporting and Accountability. So with that quick introduction, I am going to start the second research workshop. Very exciting. So it features two studies on some evidence on the effects of social platform moderation and deplatforming. And the first presenter, Vicki Wei Tang. Vicki, are you online?
Yeah, I'm here. Jenny, nice to meet you.
Very nice to meet you, Vicki. Super high tech and awesome that we get you beamed straight from Washington, from Georgetown. Yeah. Very good, very exciting. So Vicki will talk about her research in a little bit, but before that, just a quick rules, just to review our rules of engagement. So 20 minutes for Vicki to present, and then 15 minutes of questions. Okay, so let's get started, Vicki.
Okay, so thanks to the conference organizer for giving me the opportunities to present my work at the Cambridge Disinformation Summit. And the topic of my research is about the determinants and the capital market consequences of disinformation and the evidence from user-requested content moderation on social media platforms. And so if we look at broadly, what are the regulatory regime for the data and the information flows globally? I think there are probably three regimes, right? The first regulatory regimes takes the citizen-based perspective and adopts an interventionalist approach. And the European Union is a good example. Look at the general data protection regulations. Takes a very much kind of interventionalist approach. And then the second type of regulatory regime take a market-based perspective and adopts kind of self-regulatory approach, and the US is a good example. So if you look at US, there's lack of general regulation about information and the data flow. And the third regulatory regime, I would call this, takes a kind of state-centered perspective, and it takes a kind of mixed but restrictive approach. And China, look at China there, where the central government actually controls the data and the information flow, but it kind of restrict local governments and the private entities' access to data and information. And so in this background, I think the study is really motivated by multi-factors. So the first motivation is really there's a lack of this large sample empirical evidence on the determinants and the capital market consequences of disinformation. And the second motivation is really, if you look around, there's this lack of direct empirical evidence on the motivation for spreading disinformation. And the last motivation is really the content moderation process is generally very opaque. And so this study actually takes advantage of the in-house data from a social media platform, and it provides a unique opportunities to take an inside look at the content moderation process, especially on the very restrictive regulatory regime. And so what's my research question? The research question is really about, okay, what are the determinants of financial disinformation and its capital market consequences? And in this literature, I think a critical empirical challenge is how do we identify financial disinformation reliably, right? So what the prior study did is they took an indirect approach. Usually they use a manual labeling mechanism to verify information content and establish ground truth. And for example, Kogan 2 2023, right, they used the SEC identified the stock promotion scheme as fake news. However, there's a challenge in this ground truth labeling approach is if we think about financial news actually contains kind of domain knowledge and inside information, so which is really difficult to verify for the general public. So in contrast to those indirect approach, what this study does is it takes a direct approach where disinformation is actually identified by the corporate insiders who utilize the user complaint options, which is provided by the social media platform. And so a little bit of the background on the social media platform on the investigation. So this social media platform is one of the largest social media community for retail investors in China. And the second, on this social media platform, it maintains an information discussion forum, also called the stock chat, for virtually every public companies listed on the Shanghai Stock Exchange and the Shenzhen Stock Exchange. And what does user do on this information discussion forum? They post their thoughts and opinions about the company and its executives. And some users even venture out to share their predictions about the future stock price movements, what's going to happen to the company, etc. And let's look at take a close look at the content moderation process that this social media platform adopts. From the period of January 2021 to July 2022, altogether, there are about 195 million posts on this social media platform. Surprisingly, or not surprising, depends on your perspective, 19% of those posts were deleted for various reasons. And so that accounts for what this means is in this 19-month period, altogether, there were 37 million posts were deleted. So how they were deleted? So a little bit less than a third of those posts were deleted by the post originators. And then 35% of those are actually automatically deleted by the platform's proprietary algorithm to follow the government's guideline on cyber information. And then another third was manually deleted by the content moderation staff. And so I highlighted then what are the reasons for the deletion by the content moderation staff. So some of those posts are triggered by user complaints or disinformation, which accounts to about 3.5%. And in absolute amount, it amounts to about 435,000 posts. And then some other posts are triggered by the infringement of intellectual rights. And then the majority of them actually are manually deleted by some unspecified reasons. So let me give you a few examples of this user-requested content moderation, because this is, what this study kind of utilizes. And so the first example is usually, two company A and the company B are talking about the possible merger and takeover. And then, the next example is I saw a lot is the chairman of the company was under disciplinary action from the government, or the largest shareholders of the company was actually under arrest. And then there's some kind of disinformation about executives of company E tunnel the corporate resources or manipulated stock prices, or they will be listed soon. And some even claim that the company actually engaged in fraudulent financial reporting in the past. And other example, including the company actually win a bid in the major contracts, or companies started a strategic alliance with the state-owned major players in the industry. And the last one is interesting. Some users actually either curses or personal attack on the executives or the large shareholders of the company are. And those were also kind of a user complained about them, and the platform actually delete some of those curses and personal attacks. And so let's kind of take a look at, okay, what are the characteristics of those claimed financial disinformation? And what I find is the firms are more likely to complain about negative posts as disinformation. So if I use the negativity index, those classified as financial disinformation, the negativity index is about 0.8. If I use a matched post related to the same complaining company, then the negativity index is only about 0.65. And second, observation is that firms are more likely to complain about posts that received a broader viewership and elicited greater user engagement as disinformation. And give you some statistics. On average, disinformation will viewed 315 times, liked 268 times, forwarded 71 times, and commented 10 times on average. And in contrast, those matched posts related to the same company during the same period is viewed 121 times, liked 110 times, forwarded 25 times, and commented 3 times. And then the third finding is actually I found similar linguistic patterns between disinformation and those matched posts. And this finding is in contrast to the prior finding that promotional disinformation identified by the SEC can be detected using linguistic cues such as complexity and writing styles. In my sample, actually, I didn't find significant differences in linguistic pattern between disinformation and the matched posts. And then, okay, then let's look at the company that are more likely to utilize the user complaint options. So what I do is I'm using one-on-one matched sample. So this matched sample, including those public listed companies that do not request the removal of posts related to the same topic during the corresponding month. And there are 3 key empirical findings. So first of all, on average, the complaining firms is larger. And the second is the state-owned firms are more likely to complain about the posting of disinformation than their privately owned counterpart. And the third observation is firms that have lower prior month returns are more likely to complain about disinformation. And so if I look at these empirical patterns, I feel like there are 2 mutually possible interpretations, right? We can say that the large and state-owned companies with lower prior month return are more susceptible to disinformation attack. Or we can say that those firms actually are more likely to fight back once subject to disinformation attack. So at this stage, I'm not able to differentiate, okay, what are the kind of exact interpretation, but my intuition is it's probably both. And then, okay, what are the capital market consequences of disinformation? And what's helpful in this data set is the in-house data actually provides the exact timestamp for the initial posting of the posts classified as disinformation. And I link to this minute-by-minute high-frequency market data. I can examine the capital market consequences of user complaint disinformation on social media. So there are 2 windows I look at. First, I'm looking at a very short window of 5 minutes from the initial posting of disinformation. And, there's actually no significant either in the mean return or median return within this 5 minutes. However, if I expanded the window from the initial posting of the information to the closing of the trading days, actually, I do find a significant negative stock return about 1.2%, and the median is about 1.4%. Both of them are statistically significant. Then how about when the companies actually when the platform remove those disinformation, right? So again, I didn't find any significant market reactions within 5 minutes from the removal of disinformation. And however, if I kind of expanded the window to the end of the trading day, there is positive mean return and the median return. And I think, that's interesting. But for me, the most interesting finding is the following. If we look at the intersection or in the cross-section, what I find is the short window return actually decrease with viewership and the user engagement of disinformation. So what this says is, if you look at the cross-section of those short-term return in response to the posting of the disinformation, when the disinformation gets more viewership and it gets more kind of user engagement, the returns is actually lower. So I think this cross-sectional differences establish some interplay between the kind of propagation of the disinformation and the market reaction or capital market consequences of the disinformation. And then I think what's also very interesting using this unique data set is it allowed me to look directly to see whether there's some financial incentives to spread misinformation. So I found that 2% of the users on this social media platform, they link their social media profiles with brokerage accounts. And so by leveraging this unique data set that links the origination of disinformation with actual trades, this study actually provides preliminary and direct evidence on whether disinformation is partially motivated by financial gains accrued to the originator of disinformation. And so if I look at the trades in the 3-day window after the initial posting of disinformation, I find that in general, there's net buy position, and possibly those are the people try to benefit from the temporary price decline upon posting. And those positions account for about 11% as a percent in the complaining company as a percentage of the originator's portfolio holding. And then asymmetrically, the trades in the 3-day window after the removal of the disinformation, what I notice is it's the net sell position, and those are the originators possibly benefit from the temporary price increase upon removal. And those positions actually account for about 9% of the originator's portfolio holding. And so I think that to summarize the finding about this is the actually trades suggest that a fraction of originators' disinformation are financially prepositioned to benefit from the dissemination of the disinformation. And what this evidence established is that establish a direct interplay between the sender's motive and the propagation of disinformation, which is consistent with the truth default theory established by Levin. Okay, to kind of summarize them, this study's finding is user requested removals of disinformation account for about 3.5% of deleted posts. And so deleted posts classified as disinformation are more negative in tone. They receive a broader viewership and elicit greater user engagement. And second is the larger and state-owned companies are more likely to utilize the user complaint option on the platform to request the removal of disinformation. And the third is if we use high-frequency stock price, the study found that there's no intermediate market reaction within a 5-minute window, but the price does decline from the posting of the disinformation to the market closing, and the return decreases with viewership and user engagement. And lastly is a subset of the originators of disinformation actually are financially prepositioned to benefit from spreading disinformation. And in my view, I think the contribution of this study lies in kind of 3 aspects. First is, in contrast to the indirect approach, this study employs a direct approach to identify financial disinformation by utilizing the user complaint option on the social media, because the complaining firms has insider information to identify disinformation. And the second is the study established a direct interplay between the originator's motive and the propagations of disinformation. And the third is, I think this study does provide unique opportunities to provide new sites into the content moderation process on the restrictive regulatory framework and explore the determinants and the capital market consequences of user complaint options. And thank you all for listening, and I'm looking forward to the kind of a Q&A session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vicki, for the really interesting presentation. So I am going to open it up to the floor, but since I get a first dip, and my research is on fraud, or partially on fraud, may I just ask a quick question? I understand that the complaints are from the companies, for example, but have you found cases where actually it's not disinformation? So actually there is, or there was fraud that was later, found. It's just the company at the time didn't want it to be talked about, and they complained.
Oh, Jenny, thanks for this very interesting questions. And so far, we haven't found that, but I think, in my mind, I do entertain the possibility that, some of those companies take advantage of this user complaint kind of options to manage their social media reputations. Yeah, but empirically, so far, I haven't found it. But it doesn't mean that, it's not a distinct possibility.
Thank you. All right, so yes, please.
Hi, I'm not sure if you can see me, but thank you. That was really interesting. I have a question. You showed that most of the disinformation was negative, and so we would expect that to cause the stock price to go down, as you saw. But did you analyze the cases when the disinformation was positive and should have caused the stock price to go up, or is it kind of averaging the ups and the downs, and so maybe the negative effect is actually greater than was shown here? I hope that's clear.
Oh, yeah, very good question, right? Because if we look at those examples, there are some examples where actually the disinformation is positive, right? They say that, company win a bid in the major contracts, right? So, however, when I look at the kind of the empirical, I did kind of partition into negative disinformation versus positive disinformation. And we actually, for some reason, this is very interesting, I did not find a positive price reaction to those like a positive disinformation. And a part of it, I guess, is about, some maybe investors kind of realize, so I mean, this is a very interesting finding, and, your question is very interesting as well. So I think, my next step is to explore why this asymmetry.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Hi. If I heard correctly, you implied that the companies that utilize the complaint mechanism have inside information because they know that the disinformation will be taken down. Are you also saying that, for example, those companies' executives might be trading on that inside information? So who are the traders? Who are the people that are trading on this information, and could it be utilized by insiders?
Okay, very good. Very good question. So this is a part of that restrictive kind of regime is, although we have 2% of users, they do link the social media profile with, their brokerage account. Unfortunately, I don't know the identity of those users. That's kind of all, I don't know who they are, and I don't even know their brokerage kind of account. I know they are trading trades after they post but having said that, this does not mean that I cannot investigate the direction you suggested. I'm going to look at actually the executive trades directly and to see when the company complain about this disinformation, what are the actions that are taken by those executives themselves.
Thank you. Next question? No more questions? All right. Well, I guess you presented very clearly and very convincingly. So I guess we'll move on to the next presentation. But before that, let's have another round of applause. Thank you for sharing your research with us.